I'm sorry not to be able to be with you tonight to receive this great honor.
One movie set was so toxic that actors watched their bathwater turn blue from chemicals. Another was cursed so badly that 2 lead actors died before filming even started. A third became the scene of brutal murders after cameras stopped rolling. Hollywood has left behind more than just props and buildings. They've abandoned places where real tragedies happened, where people got sick, where darkness took over. And some of them are still standing today, waiting for the next victim. The 10 Commandments beneath the sands of California. There's a secret most people have never heard of. It's not a natural wonder or a forgotten ghost town. It's an entire Egyptian city, built not by ancient hands, but by Hollywood. In 1923, director Cecil B. DeMille created something massive for his film, The 10 Commandments. Out in the Guadalupe-Nipomo dunes, he built a full-scale Egyptian set so large it felt more like a real city than a backdrop. It stretched 800 feet across and reached as high as a 12-story building. The towering temple gates rose 120 feet. There were 21 enormous plaster sphinxes, 8 huge lions, and 4 statues of Ramses II, each weighing 40 tons. Over 1,300 workers built it, using 25,000 pounds of nails and 250 tons of plaster. But what made this story unforgettable wasn't just the size. It was what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. Instead of taking the set down, DeMille buried it. Not a few props, the whole thing. The cost to remove it was too high. But that wasn't the only reason. DeMille was famously obsessive about his work. He didn't want other studios reusing any part of his grand creation. So he made a trench, pushed everything in, and covered it with sand. Just like that, the city of the pharaoh vanished. For 60 years, people forgot it even existed. Then in 1983, a filmmaker named Peter Brosnan stumbled upon a clue. It came from DeMille's own autobiography. That hint led Brosnan on a journey into the dunes. What he and a team of archaeologists found was shocking. Massive sphinx heads weighing 300 pounds were still buried, nearly untouched. The colors on them, reds, blues, and deep terracotta, were still vivid, even after being underground for almost a century. Those colors were painted specifically to make the statues pop on black and white film, a clever trick lost to time. Digging up the site isn't easy. Every excavation permit costs around $135,000. But that hasn't stopped the team from continuing their work. What they're unearthing isn't just a lost movie set. It's a piece of Hollywood history that has become a real archaeological site. These kinds of sets no longer exist from that era. They were never meant to survive. But this one did, trapped under the dunes like a time capsule. Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. In the middle of the hot Tunisian desert, about 20 kilometers north of a town called Nefta, there's a strange and quiet place. It looks like something from another world. That's because it is, or at least, it used to be. Back in 1997, a group of filmmakers arrived here and started building a movie set for Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. They didn't just throw up a few props and call it a day. They spent 5 months building a full-scale spaceport called Mos Espa. It had about 20 round white buildings spread out across the sand, and tall moisture evaporators that looked like machines from another planet. To even get there, they had to build a new road connecting the site to the nearest highway. The whole thing cost around $3 million. This place wasn't just a pretty background. It became the childhood home of Anakin Skywalker. That meant it was the starting point of Darth Vader's story. For fans of the saga, this wasn't just a set. It was a piece of history, and yet it's vanishing. Not because of time or vandals or even neglect, but because of the desert itself. In 2013, a scientist named Ralph Lorenz from Johns Hopkins University published something surprising in a journal called Geomorphology. He had been studying the way sand dunes move, not just small piles of sand, but giant ones called barshans. These dunes creep across the land over time, carried by wind. And as it turns out, one of them is heading straight for Mos Espa. Lorenz calculated that the set could be completely buried in just 6 years. And once the first dune finishes the job, an even bigger one is waiting behind it. That news shocked a lot of people, especially in Tunisia. The government had hoped to use the site as a tourist attraction. After all, how many people can say they stood in the birthplace of Darth Vader? There were even talks about bulldozing the dunes to save the set, but scientists said that would only buy a little more time. Eventually, the desert always wins. Now, if you want to see Mos Espa for yourself, it's not easy. You have to cross a rough desert landscape just to get there. And when you do, you'll find buildings already filled with sand. Some parts are gone completely, swallowed by the earth. The heat is brutal. Summers often hit over 50 degrees Celsius or 122 degrees Fahrenheit. The dry air cracks the walls, and wind eats away at what's left. Bit by bit, the spaceport is fading. Full Metal Jacket. Stanley Kubrick didn't just film a war movie. He turned one of London's most dangerous industrial ruins into the battle-scarred streets of Vietnam. For Full Metal Jacket, he chose the abandoned Baekton Gas Works as the stand-in for the devastated city of Hue. Built in 1870, this place had once been the largest gas works in the world. By 1949, it powered most of northern London, but by the time Kubrick arrived in the 1980s, it was a crumbling, toxic wasteland. That's exactly what made it perfect for him. What most people didn't realize was how dangerous it truly was. Actor Matthew Modine, who played Private Joker, spoke about it years later. He said Baekton was one of the most toxic places he had ever been. The soil was packed with over 30 known cancer-causing chemicals. Asbestos coated nearly everything. The actors would bathe at night and watch the water turn cobalt blue from the chemicals that clung to their skin. Kubrick had permission to do whatever he wanted there. The site was already set for demolition, so he took full advantage. He brought in hundreds of palm trees to mimic the Vietnamese environment. They had to be lifted into place with cranes and maintained constantly. Vietnamese signs, shop fronts, and ads were placed across the set, transforming the broken buildings into a haunting replica of a war zone. But Kubrick didn't just use the decay, he made it worse. His team tore into buildings and reshaped the ruins to match his vision more closely. By the end of filming, the site was in even worse condition than when they started. Nothing remains of that massive effort today. The gas works are gone. The Vietnam set is gone. All that's left is the Baekton Alps, a strange series of artificial hills made from decades of industrial waste. At one point, they were even used for dry skiing. The good, the bad, and the ugly. The Tabernas Desert in Spain feels like a place where time forgot to move. It's dry, empty, and silent. But hidden in that silence is a story that never really ended. For over 70 years, this 12,000-hectare stretch of Andalusian land was one of the busiest movie sets in the world. From the 1950s all the way to 2020, more than 300 films were shot here. It became so important to cinema that the European Film Academy officially called it a treasure of European film culture. Back in the 1960s and 70s, this desert saw something almost unreal. At times, as many as 25 movies were being filmed here at once. Cowboys would cross paths with Roman soldiers. Extras wandered onto the wrong sets. It became a strange dream, where Clint Eastwood might ride past a medieval castle or a Roman chariot might roll through a Western saloon, but nobody stopped the cameras. That mix of chaos and creativity turned the Tabernas Desert into something magical. It became Hollywood's Wild West, even though it sat thousands of miles away in southern Spain. Some of the biggest stars in history lived here for weeks at a time. Clint Eastwood, Henry Fonda, Charlton Heston, Sophia Loren, Richard Burton, and Elizabeth Taylor all walked across these dusty plains, turning the desert into a second home. Directors like Sergio Leone didn't just use it as a background. They built entire towns, real buildings, real streets, real jails. These weren't just movie props. They were functioning worlds designed to look and feel like the American frontier. Decades later, some of those towns are still standing. You can walk through mini Hollywood, Texas Hollywood, and Western Lyon. You can see the same buildings where duels were shot and heroes rode off into the sunset. At El Tablazo, you can stand in the spot where Blondie left Tuco in the desert in the good, the bad, and the ugly. At El Chortal, you can see the same jail from for a few dollars more. These places haven't been rebuilt. They've simply been left behind. The wood is cracked, the paint is faded, but the story is still there. If you look closely, you'll find old signs and broken props buried in the sand. Some of the equipment from those days still sits in corners, covered in dust. It's like walking through a forgotten museum, that was never meant to exist, where the wind flips through the pages of unfinished stories. Sergio Leone once tried to make the desert feel like Monument Valley, the famous American Western location, but he did it for a fraction of the cost, and the result was more than just smart filmmaking. He left behind something that outlived the people who built it. Big Fish, hidden deep in the woods of Alabama, there's a place that feels like a dream someone forgot to wake up from. It's the town of Spectre, built by Tim Burton for his 2003 film, Big Fish. Unlike most movie sets that are torn down after filming, this one was left behind on purpose. The crew offered to tear it all down, but the landowners, Bobby and Lynn Bright, said no. They decided to keep it, not knowing it would become one of the strangest tourist spots in the South. Burton spent around $2 million building this fantasy town from the ground up. It had several houses, a general store, a bright white church, and even a spooky forest with styrofoam trees. The trees were made by the same studio that worked on Jurassic Park, which shows how much effort went into making everything feel real. But the buildings were only meant to be seen from the outside. There were no real walls, no floors, and nothing built to last. Still, the designs were so detailed that many of the structures managed to survive nearly 20 years of rain, heat, and storms. Time, however, caught up with Spectre. Some buildings started to collapse. When the owners tried to clean up the mess by burning leftover wood, the fire got out of control and destroyed the entire row of shops. The house that belonged to Helena Bonham Carter's character, Jenny, was damaged by floods and later torn down. Then, as if the place was cursed by the very magic it once celebrated, lightning hit one of the remaining homes on June 2nd, 2023. It burned down just like something out of a movie. What's left today is strange and oddly peaceful. There are 6 houses still standing. The church remains, though it's worn and cracked. 2 of the fake forest trees are still there, and the columns from Jenny's old house are all that's left of her part in the town. Every year, around 12,000 people visit this fading dream. They pay $3 to walk through it and feel, even for just a moment, like they've stepped into another world. And maybe the most magical part is what's happened in the church. A group of goats moved in. They sleep under the tall roof and wander through the town like they own the place. People call it Goat Heaven now. Lost Horizon. Frank Capra's film Lost Horizon was meant to be a dream. What it became was a cautionary tale. In 1937, Columbia Pictures poured everything into creating a mythical place called Shangri-La. It wasn't just a movie, it was an obsession. The studio approved a record-breaking budget of $1.25 million. That made it the most expensive movie they had ever attempted. But things got out of control fast. By the end, the total cost had more than doubled. It reached $2.6 million, including prints and advertising. In today's money, that's around 30 to 40 million. Most of that money went into building something Hollywood had never seen before. Production designer Stephen Goosen created a futuristic mountain paradise by combining Eastern and Western styles. He built 65 different sets across Columbia's ranch in Burbank. 10 prop men crafted more than 700 pieces to give it an authentic Tibetan feel. The heart of the film, the Great Lamasery, became the largest set ever constructed in Hollywood at the time. Goosen would go on to win an Oscar for his work, but behind the beauty, things were falling apart. The casting of the High Lama turned into something almost cursed. First, the role was given to a 56-year-old stage actor named A.E. Anson. He died of a heart attack right after learning he got the part. His replacement, 58-year-old Henry B. Walthall, also died before filming even started. The crew, now rattled, decided to cast someone younger. Sam Jaffe, who was 45, finally made it to the screen. The shooting conditions weren't any better. The Shangri-La sets were built right next to Hollywood Way, a noisy road. To avoid traffic sounds, they had to film at night. That added massive overtime costs. Meanwhile, the snow scenes and airplane shots were filmed in a giant freezer warehouse in Los Angeles. Inside, the sub-zero cold would freeze equipment until it cracked or broke. That led to delay after delay. Filming started on March 23, 1936. It was supposed to take just over 2 months. Instead, it lasted 100 days. That was 34 more than planned. Frank Capra shot 1.1 million feet of film in total. A single 4-minute scene used up 6,000 feet alone. That's the same amount normally used for an hour of screen time. The High Llama scenes were filmed for 6 straight days, then reshot twice more just because of makeup concerns. And after all that effort, all that money, and all that time, the entire set was left behind. The towering lamasery of Shangri-La, once the most elaborate structure ever built for a movie, was abandoned on Columbia's lot. Slowly, the California sun and wind broke it down. Some of it collapsed. Some of it was taken apart on purpose. By the late 1960s, almost nothing was left. Today, just a few stones remain, half buried under decades of dirt. Quo Vadis. Quo Vadis wasn't just a movie. It was a turning point. In 1951, MGM spent a record-breaking $7 million to bring ancient Rome back to life. That would be around $80 million today. It was the most expensive film ever made at the time, and it looked like it. The studio didn't just build sets, they built a world. To pull it off, MGM leased Cinecittà Studios just outside Rome. It covered nearly 150 acres and had 9 massive sound stages. Crews began arriving in 1948. Art directors, set decorators, and costume designers came together to create a version of Rome that felt real. They didn't just build a palace or two. They built the Circus of Nero, Nero's Palace, an entire street of ancient Rome, a great bridge, and the Plautius Villa. They even got permission to restore part of the real Appian Way. Nothing was done halfway. The team needed thousands of costumes for extras. They made drapes, carpets, goblets from glass and metal, and 10 full chariots. To light everything in Technicolor, they shipped 250 tons of equipment from Los Angeles and brought in more from London. Italy's government stepped in to help by supplying power from a retired battleship. It was the only way to meet the energy demands. Cinecittà itself was in ruins. During the war, the Nazis had stripped it of its electrical systems. After that, it became a refugee camp for survivors of concentration camps. Turning it back into a working studio was its own kind of miracle. Filming started on May 22, 1950. Thousands of Italian extras filled the giant sets, bringing the streets and arenas of Rome to life. The gamble paid off. Quo Vadis became MGM's biggest hit since Gone with the Wind. It brought the studio back from the edge of bankruptcy and earned 8 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. Pirates of the Caribbean. In 2002, Disney turned a quiet stretch of St. Vincent's coastline into the legendary town of Port Royal. It was built just for Pirates of the Caribbean, and for a short while, Walilaboo Bay became the center of a Hollywood blockbuster. Johnny Depp, Orlando Bloom, and Keira Knightley walked those docks, rehearsed in those hotel rooms, and brought pirate lore to life on a set that looked and felt like the real thing. Then filming ended. The cameras left, but the town never disappeared. More than 20 years later, much of it is still there. The Walilaboo Anchorage Hotel, once a home base for the stars, is now just a quiet Caribbean restaurant. You can still sit in the same rooms where actors once got into costume. Around the property, the original movie facades and props are scattered like pieces of a shipwreck, slowly being reclaimed by nature. It's like walking through a dream that hasn't ended yet. One of the most iconic props still stands: Jack Sparrow's ship mast, the same one he famously rode into Port Royal. After filming, Disney left it as a gift. It's still there today, planted in the sand as if waiting for another take. A few cannons also remain along the shore, though most are rusted from years of salt air and heavy storms. Nature hasn't been kind. The dock bridge has needed repairs almost every year since. Storms roll in and rip pieces apart. In 2021, the La Soufrière volcano erupted and covered the whole bay in ash. Just months later, Hurricane Elsa struck and wiped out even more of the old structures. Some props that had survived for nearly 20 years were finally lost. And yet, some things never changed. A jagged rock formation still holds the chilling message from the movie. Skeletal pirates with a wooden sign warning others to stay away. That spot, untouched by time, feels like a scene left frozen. The black sand beneath it, created by volcanic activity, only adds to the strange beauty of it all. It's quiet, eerie, and real in a way a theme park could never be. There are plans to build a Pirates of the Caribbean theme park in the area by 2025, but no matter how detailed that may be, it won't match the raw feeling of Walilabu Bay. What was meant to be a temporary set has turned into a living piece of film history. Anonymous deep in the woods near Berlin, something strange once stood. It looked like a forgotten medieval village, with Tudor houses, cobbled streets, and an old stone well in the middle. People who saw pictures of it online thought it was a real place from the past, left to crumble in the forest. But it wasn't real at all. It was a movie set, and not just any set. It was built for two completely different films, under layers of cold, hard work, strange choices, and a lot of money that most people never heard about. It started back in 2011. Roland Emmerich was making Anonymous, a film that stirred controversy by suggesting Shakespeare didn't write his own plays. For that, they built a full medieval village at Studio Babelsberg, the oldest large-scale film studio in the world. This place isn't small. It stretches over 460,000 square meters. They didn't cut corners either. Workers built the houses from scratch and even laid real cobblestones. They did it all in the freezing cold, pushing through harsh German winters, sometimes working in -10 degrees. Their hands were numb, their breath visible in the air, but the village slowly came to life. Once Anonymous wrapped, something unexpected happened. Instead of tearing it all down, the studio kept the entire village, not for tours or museum visits, but for reuse. 2 years later, the same village reappeared, dressed slightly differently, in Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters. Most viewers had no idea they were seeing a recycled set, and why would they? It looked perfect for a dark fairy tale world full of witches and secrets. But behind that fantasy was a strange mix of failure and success. Hansel and Gretel didn't impress the critics. They slammed it for its thin plot and over-the-top violence. Still, the public didn't seem to care. The movie made $226 million globally, even though it only cost $50 million to make. 60 witches flew through the air using real wire rigs. The cast and crew spent 3 months filming in that haunted little village. And then, when it was all done, the set was torn down and vanished forever. That's what makes this story so strange. Millions of dollars were spent. Countless hours of hard labor were poured into making something beautiful and detailed. And yet, in the end, it was treated like scrap. Not because it failed, but because that's just how the industry works. Build something real, sell the illusion, and then destroy it before anyone realizes how much of it was true. Even today, the only thing left are the photographs. Some of them were taken by Alex Friedrich, a props maker who watched the village go from alive to empty. His photos went viral, fooling thousands into thinking they were looking at a real medieval ruin in Scotland. The Blues Brothers, the Dixie Square Mall in Harvey, Illinois, was meant to be a symbol of growth. It opened on August 31st, 1966, with 64 stores and cost $25 million to build. The entire space covered 600,000 square feet. But within just 12 years, it was completely shut down. By November 1978, rising crime and a wave of families leaving the area had forced the doors closed for good. What followed was something no one expected. 2 years later, in August 1980, director John Landis showed up with a film crew for the Blues Brothers. He didn't have to build a set. The abandoned mall was already there, looking like the end of the world. They made the empty space look alive again, at least for a while. Mannequins were placed in windows, lights flickered back on, and the crew staged a wild car chase through the empty stores. It became one of the most iconic scenes in movie history. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the crew walked away. They left the mall just as it was, torn apart and wrecked. A lawsuit followed, but didn't go anywhere. After that, things only got worse. The mall turned into something out of a horror story. With no security and no repairs, it became a breeding ground for crime. In 1993, a man named Raymond Eves committed a brutal rape and murder inside the mall. Just 3 months earlier, he had attacked a mentally disabled girl there too, and still nothing was done. The building kept falling apart. Arsonists set fires. The roof started caving in. Vandals smashed windows and spray-painted every wall they could find. The most haunting part was that all of this was happening right near a police station. The place became so strange and eerie that people on the internet started following its downfall. By 2003, It had become a cult site for urban explorers. They took thousands of photos. Some showed trees growing straight through the floors. Others captured massive sheets of ice in winter or pools of rainwater reflecting light coming in through giant holes in the roof. Over the years, there were many promises to bring them all back. Plans were announced in 1985, 1989, 1997, and again in 2005. None of them worked. Finally, in February 2012, demolition began. It was paid for in part by Hurricane Ike disaster relief funds and a $4 million federal grant. The work was finished by March 17, 2012.